Okay, so we just finished writing maths.py, and now we're going to take a look at our second program, maths.py. I'm going to start by creating a new file, a new Python program called maths.py. Now, it is super important to include that S because in this program, we are going to make use of the math module, which we have to import. And if we name our Python program the same name as a module we're going to import, things aren't going to work the way that we expect. So please make sure you don't call your program maths.py, but you call it something else, like maths.py. So the goal of this program is to take a number as input from the user and print out the following information. So in the previous program, we practiced writing the smallest piece of code we could and testing it. We're going to do the same thing this time, but I want to make it slightly more efficient. So computer scientists are always about efficiency and effectiveness. And writing or typing user input takes me a while. I'd rather not do that yet. So what I can do is I can write out, I can test getting a number as input from the user. So I'm going to create a number, input, please enter a number. And again, I'm putting a space after my colon there. And do you recall what function we have to add to convert my string to a number? Remember that it's called eval? Awesome if you do. Okay. And to test it, so I need to actually test this again. How can I test that num is actually a number and not a string? Well, I can test it by multiplying num by something. Let me see if I can type this properly. So let's multiply it by 7 and see what we get. Okay, let's run it. Enter a phrase. Oops, I'm running the wrong program. Let me stop that and run maths.py instead. So I want to enter a number. 34. Good. So the result is a bigger number. What happens if we removed eval? And I entered a number. Woohoo! So you can multiply strings, but it's not the same as multiplying two numbers together. Do you see how my 34 turned into 34 repeated 7 times? Pretty cool, but not what we're looking for here. So I'm going to undo that. And you may want to consider checking out the shortcuts to be more efficient of a programmer. So for example, file saving or cut, copy, paste, and undo. Learning what these shortcut commands are can be really helpful in increasing your efficiency and effectiveness as a programmer. Okay, so now I know I have a number, but I really don't want to type a number each time. So what I'm going to do instead is I've tested this line. I'm going to comment it out, and I'm just going to set my number to be something else. Okay? All right. And let's see. So let's start off with part A of the problem. I want to print out the absolute value of the number. Well, I've used absolute value a lot, and I happen to know that the name of the function is ABS. And in fact, you might notice, because I believe, let me see if I can bring it up in a different window, I'm pretty sure that on the reading code examples, oops, no, these are the wrong ones. Let me try and find it. One moment, please. So if you look at the example problems, the reading code problems, you might see some of the functions that I'm asking you to use here. It's important to know how to search for your own functions, but Sometimes you won't have to. So here I can see that absolute value is ABS. And so I'm going to use that here to get the absolute value of my number. Oops. Okay. Now let's test it. Oh, good. It printed out my number. Well, shoot. How do I know if my absolute value function is working? If I give it a positive number, am I going to be able to tell that I'm correctly using the absolute value function? No. So to test this out, I need to give myself a negative number. Let's try running it again. Aha! This time I can clearly see that the absolute value function is working because the output was 7. Okay, so that gives us part A. Now let's go on to part B. I want to take the floor of the number using the math module. Okay, great. So that's a hint that I need to import the math module. Now there's 2 ways to do the import. I can simply import math. And then here, I would say the name of the module, dot, and I can search for something that looks like floor. Here we go. And then num is what I'm going to do for the floor. Now the other way I can do it is to say import floor from math. And then I would be able to say print floor num. So you would only ever use one of these approaches. An advantage of just simply importing math is that you can type a dot after the module name and figure out what functions are available to you. However, if you know the function already and you're going to be using it a lot, then it might be simpler to import it this way. So I can only have one at a time, so I'm going to comment out the version that I'm not going to use. Also, notice that I put the import at the top of the program. So when we structure our Python programs, we're going to have things in a certain order. So let me test this out. Oh, but before I do, is floor going to, am I going to be able to see the results of floor on a negative number? Probably not. So let me try a different number. And let's see what happens. Good. So I can clearly see that absolute value is working. I have a positive number. And that floor is working because negative 7.89 was rounded down to negative 8. Awesome. Now let's see if we can figure out how to round the number to 2 decimal places. Do I have a clue in my reading exercise? No, there is nothing. I don't see anything rounded here. Okay, so let's Google for it. You could also type the name of the variable and see, go from there. Let's try that first. So I'm going to print num dot, no, num dot round doesn't exist. So unlike strings, I can't just type the name of a numeric variable and figure out what functions I can use on it. So for example, absolute value, I couldn't type num dot absolute. So this is something that we might need to Google for. Okay, so I'm going to say rounding a number in Python. Oh, look. And I have a description right at the top of my Google results. The built-in Python function round takes in 2 numbers, one to be rounded and one that specifies the number of decimal places to include. Let's take a look. In fact, I think the number of decimal places might be optional. So we see, let's try and find just rounding numbers. Here they're rounding it for 2 decimal places. Oh, here we go. Look, If you would prefer to round a number with 0 decimal places, then it's an optional parameter. You don't need that parameter. Awesome. Okay. So let me go back and simply round. And I'm going to go back to the instructions. Oh, it says the number should be rounded to 2 decimal places. So in this case, I need to call round with 2 parameters. One is the number I'm rounding. Second is the number of decimal places I want to round it to. So is the variable I'm using going to be effective in testing rounding to 2 decimal places? No, because right now I only have 2 decimal places. So let me add, a couple more numbers to this. 8, 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, and see what we get. Awesome, and I've correctly rounded to negative 7.89. Just to be thorough, I would also like to round up. So that was an example where I rounded down, but just to make sure things are working, now I'm going to round up. And we successfully round up to negative 7.9. And now I want to put it all together. I don't want to submit this program if this were an assignment, because the first step, remember, is to take a number as input from the user. So I'm going to comment out my test case. I'm going to comment out my test case and uncomment getting user input. And so putting it all together, I'm going to enter a number, and I can clearly see that absolute value is working, floor is working, and so is round.